Hello, I'm Joe Walensky, and I'm the program manager for ConveyUX. That's produced by Blink, and we've done 7 years in a row in the Seattle area, and we're going into our 8th annual year. That's coming up March 3rd, 4th, and 5th in downtown Seattle at the Seattle Westin Hotel. So we're really excited about it. We have our largest program yet, and I get to speak with many people who will be presenting in the conference. And so today I am talking to Michael Kontopoulos. Hello, Michael. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Joe. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, I'm talking from Blink's headquarters office in downtown Seattle. Where are you speaking to us from?
I am speaking to you from Boston, Massachusetts. If you're familiar with the area, our office is in the Seaport District, so I'm looking out at the ocean right now.
Oh, all right. Excellent. Now, that's where we did our special Boston event last August. Was it the
That's
Renaissance
right.
there? Yeah. So well, it's good to have you in the program. Always a good place to start is for you to talk a little bit about your background and let people know what kinds of things that you do for work.
Sure. Well, my background is interesting. I took a windy road to get to where I am today. I actually started in the arts. I have a BFA and an MFA, and I specialized in kind of the intersection of art, design, and technology. I did a lot of focus on interactive artwork and public artwork and using programming and physical computing and motion and mechanics to make kind of interactive pieces. And I worked at that for quite a number of years, and I taught as a professor in that world. I taught in design and art programs, teaching code and teaching physical computing. And I kind of made my way into design circuitously over a number of years, starting in UX and product, and then ultimately kind of pivoting into research and strategy, which is what I'm doing today.
And so what typically are the projects like that you're involved in? You talk a little bit about the nature of the organization that you work for and how that fits into your job.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So you're probably aware from our email exchange, it takes a little bit of setup, and I like to do the setup because it's kind of, when you're doing design in a scientific and medical space, and what we do at Foundation Medicine is kind of vanguard, there isn't a lot of precedent for it. So essentially what the company does is we work in oncology in the cancer space, and our bread and butter product is a portfolio of tests that are ordered by physicians, oncologists, for patients that are suffering from cancer. And what happens is we sequence the DNA of that patient's tumor sample, and we're able to report back to the treating physician whether or not there are any molecular or genomic drivers of the cancer. So there might be a gene that mutated or certain biomarkers that point to a therapeutic option that would be very helpful for that patient, or a clinical trial that we can match that patient to. And so as such, design in this space is kind of without a lot of precedent. We're solving problems that haven't really existed before, and it's a challenging environment. It's also a regulated environment because one of our tests is FDA approved. And so there's a good amount of regulatory consideration that goes into, at least from a research standpoint, how we recruit, how we conduct our interviews, and what impact the findings can actually ultimately have. So day to day, I would say the bulk, we have a design team that kind of splits between UX and research. And like I said, I've touched both of them, but today lately I'm on the research side of things. I spend a majority of my time, obviously interviewing customers and working at the kind of core functions of qualitative research, recruiting, writing screeners, recruiting oncologists, pathologists, even patients if we're doing research with patients, running the interviews themselves and synthesizing the results. But I would say we also spend a really large amount of time doing internal due diligence. So, maybe if it's hard to put a ratio to it, but let's say if half the time we're actually doing research with customers or with patients, let's say the other half of the time we're making sure we understand the kind of ethno-methodology of how this office works, because we're such a fast-growing company in a fast-moving space. There's a lot of reorg, there's a lot of new hires, departments are forming around doing R&D on the science side, or working with biopharmaceutical companies, or working with commercial payers and insurance companies to advocate for testing coverage, working with patient advocacy groups and focusing on education for the general public. There's a lot going on in the company. So the research team has a lot of additional work that is required to kind of make sure that we are working cross-functionally, make sure that we are working transparently, and the right people are in the right meetings, so that we're not making things in a vacuum. We're making the right things and not just making the things right, as they say. There's a lot of exploratory research that we do, and so it's often extremely collaborative, involving people from product, the science and kind of R&D side of the company, the medical side, the pathology side, just to name a few examples. So that's kind of overview of what we do. I know I talked for a long time, but what we do, why we do it, and how that kind of ends up translating into the core functions of what a research team needs to do within this company.
Well, one of the things I enjoy about putting this event on every year and looking at the proposals is there's always so many people doing so many aspects of user experience and how to apply it in ways that I hadn't thought about, in different verticals that I hadn't thought about, and the healthcare area is certainly one where there's a lot of important nuances. So it's so it's good to have you in the program with that. And let's talk about your session a little bit. So the title is Mapping the Patient Experience. So tell us a little bit about how you came around that topic and what we can learn from it.
Sure. Yeah. Good question. So I think this is a really good transition from what I was just mentioning about how important it is for things to be cross-functional across the company. The design team in particular is well positioned to do that, because we kind of have this enterprise view of what a lot of different teams are working on. And not to disparage anybody, but there's a risk sometimes of certain teams getting really siloed and working on their particular problem or their particular niche within the healthcare world. And with the patient experience, there isn't kind of one department or one person that owns that whole experience. From the moment a physician decides to order testing for a patient, or the patient goes in and says, I heard about this kind of testing, is it right for me? There are many potential kind of teams and capabilities within foundation medicine that are activated. So we have a really robust kind of client services group that is there to field questions at any stage of the testing process, from I'm thinking about getting tested all the way through to my results, what do they mean? We have, as I mentioned earlier, a group that works with insurance companies and helps kind of patients with the insurance and with the payment side. We have a patient advocacy team that works with advocacy groups that form around diseases and goes out to conferences and patient meetings and talks about, implications of genomic testing and targeted therapies and immunotherapies. So there are many, many groups within FMI working on an aspect of the patient experience. So if it ever comes to pass that we're thinking about making a product that is patient-facing, or we have a campaign that is patient-facing, it's not something that any one group or any one person kind of can really understand holistically, or even should. So it's very front of mind for me. How can the design group, with this enterprise view that it has, make sure that the right people are in the right meetings? And this is where a lot of the elements of design thinking, like a lot of the tools in our toolkit, let's say, like running design sprints, can be really extremely useful. Plucking people or key decision makers and stakeholders out of their day-to-day work, and maybe out of their silos, getting them in a room for 24 hours or 3 days or even a week if possible, to think about the holistic patient experience. And we've been kind of banging our heads against that problem for a while now, and particularly recently, it's the right time to revisit it because we had a little bit of reorganization. We recently launched a patient-facing television and marketing campaign. So on the eve of potentially getting into some patient products, we're working through this problem of making sure we're doing this right, as I mentioned earlier, and with all the right people involved. And so I wanted my session to focus on the methods that we've been experimenting with and going through, and I want it to be an honest look at our approach, the difficulties of what it takes to get patient-facing material made or patient-facing product made, where we think we're succeeding, where we think we can do better, and hopefully the information in the session will be helpful to others that are going through similar issues.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to take that in-depth look into your real-world case studies. We're already always appreciative when we can get in the weeds with and learn about how things actually went in a project. So we want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today, and we'll look forward to seeing you when you make your trip over from Boston in March.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it myself.
All right. Thanks a lot, Michael.
Thank you.